Before we talk about methods, before we argue about data, and long before we run a single statistical test, there is a quieter, more demanding task that determines whether our research will matter at all. It is the work of thinking clearly, of naming, structuring, and disciplining our ideas. Too often, research fails not because of weak techniques, but because of weak thinking at the beginning. Conceptualization is where research earns its right to exist. It is where vague curiosity becomes a defensible inquiry, where intuition is transformed into structure, and where ideas are forced to withstand intellectual scrutiny. In today's first lecture, we are invited to slow down, to resist the urge to rush toward data, and to confront the most fundamental responsibility of a researcher: to know precisely what we are talking about and to prove that we know it. Allow me now to share my slides and at the same time to minimize myself. What we've been doing the first two Saturdays is conceptualization in research. From concepts to dimensions, indicators, and the threshold of operationalization. These opening slide introduces conceptualization as the central theme of the entire presentation, and in a way, a review of what we've been doing and looking at for the past days. It frames research not as a technical exercise, but as an intellectual process that moves deliberately from abstract ideas to structured, observable elements. The subtitle, Concepts to Dimensions, Indicators, and the Threshold to Operationalization, signals a journey, highlighting that meaning must be established before measurement is even possible. At this stage, conceptualization is positioned as a bridge between theory and method. Concepts are not data, and data are not meaning. Without careful conceptual work, even the most sophisticated methods risk producing results that are precise but irrelevant. We set the expectations here. We will focus on the logic that underpins credible research, not merely on procedural steps. As a form of summary, and in essence, we announce the core argument. Research quality is bounded by conceptual clarity. With that foundation laid, we now turn to conceptualization itself, not as a formality, but as the core intellectual task of research. Conceptualization as the core intellectual task. We assert that conceptualization precedes all other stages of research: measurement, data collection, and methodology, which we will look at in the succeeding lectures this morning. It emphasizes that conceptualization is not optional or preliminary. It is the foundation upon which meaningful research is built. We culminate in a single guiding question: what exactly am I talking about? What makes this question powerful is its deceptively simple nature. Many research proposals move forward without ever answering it clearly. Conceptualization forces researchers to define boundaries, clarify assumptions, and articulate the precise meaning of their central ideas. Without this work, methods become disconnected from purpose, and findings become difficult, if not impossible, to defend. We are reminded that research begins not with tools, but with disciplined thinking. To appreciate why this matters so deeply, we next examine what happens when this foundational question is left unanswered. The question that defines research legitimacy. We make a strong claim. If a researcher cannot clearly answer what they are studying, even that follows rests on everything that follows rests on ambiguity. Variables, instruments, statistics, and interviews lose their meaning when the underlying concepts are unclear. We highlight the consequences of imprecision, data without meaning, and conclusions without defensibility. Here, conceptualization is tied directly to research legitimacy. Legitimacy does not come from sample size or analytical sophistication alone. It comes from clarity of meaning. Imprecise concepts allow researchers to say many things while proving very little. This is why poorly conceptualized studies often generate imprecise outputs but weak insights. In short, conceptual clarity is not an academic luxury. It is a condition for legitimacy. Having established its importance, we now look at how conceptualization operates across different research traditions. Conceptualization across research traditions. We demonstrate that conceptualization is essential across qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods research. It contrasts rigorous research with opinion, advocacy, and mere description, showing that what distinguishes research is not passion or intent, but structured concepts supported by dimensions and indicators. We challenge a common misconception that conceptual rigor belongs only to quantitative work. In reality, all conceptual all credible research, regardless of method, requires clear conceptual foundations. Without them, students and studies risk drifting into advocacy or narrative description, where claims cannot be systemically examined or challenged. Thus, conceptualization emerges as a universal standard of rigor. With that in mind, the presentation now moves to the first concrete block of conceptualization. And what's that? The concept itself. The concept, naming the object of inquiry. We mark the transition to defining what a concept is. It frames the concept as the act of naming the object of inquiry, the abstract idea that organizes and gives direction to the study. The visual and structure signal that this is where research begins to take shape. Naming the concept is not about choosing impressive or fashionable terms. It is about selecting an idea that can be systematically analyzed. The concept sets the scope of the study and determines what is included and excluded. A poorly chosen or vaguely defined concept undermines every subsequent decision in the research design. At this point, we understand that concepts anchor research. The next step then is to clarify what a concept actually is and how it functions within scholarly inquiry. Defining the concept. We define a concept as an abstract idea used to organize, categorize, and explain social phenomena. It presents examples such as capacity, leadership, governance, readiness, security, and participation, illustrating how concepts function as the basic building blocks of theory and analysis. While concepts enable researchers to think systematically, especially about complex realities, they are inherently abstract. At this stage, they cannot yet be observed or measured. This is both their strength and their limitation. Concepts allow us to generalize and theorize, but without further development, they remain intellectually powerful, yet empirically empty. In summary, concepts give research its direction, but not yet its substance. To move from abstraction to analysis, concepts must be carefully unpacked and structured. This necessity sets the stage for the next phase of the discussion, which is understanding the risks and responsibilities that come with working at the conceptual level. The dual nature of concepts. We introduce a crucial tension at the heart of conceptualization. Concepts are both necessary and dangerous. They are necessary because they allow researchers to move beyond raw observation and think at a higher level of abstraction, enabling theory building and comparison across cases. At the same time, they are dangerous because in their abstract form, they are empirically empty. The danger lies in mistaking abstraction for analysis. A concept such as governance or capacity may sound rigorous, but without structure, it cannot be observed, tested, or challenged. At this stage, concepts function only as placeholders, labels without evidence. This is why conceptual sophistication must be matched with analytical discipline. A concept earns research value only when it is systematically broken down into observable components. In short, concepts open the door to explanation, but they cannot carry research on their own. Recognizing this dual nature prepares us to understand a common mistake made by many researchers: stopping too early in the conceptual process. The novice researcher's critical error. We see a recurring problem in early career research, or novice researchers for that matter: confusing importance with clarity. Researchers often select powerful, socially relevant concepts such as resilience, empowerment, or social cohesion without specifying what those concepts actually mean in research terms. We make an uncomfortable but essential point here. A concept's significance does not guarantee its research utility. A concept may matter deeply for policy or development outcomes, yet still be unusable unless it is clearly defined and structured. This error explains why many proposals sound compelling but collapse under scrutiny. They rely on shared assumptions rather than explicit definitions. Thus, conceptualization demands more than choosing the right buzzwords. It requires disciplined clarification. Without that warning in mind, the presentation now moves forward to the next step, giving structure to abstraction. From concepts to dimensions. We mark a major shift from naming a concept to organizing it. It introduces the ideas that concepts must be disaggregated into dimensions in order to become analytically useful. The visual structure reinforces the message that abstraction must be systematically unpacked. Dimensions serve as the internal architecture of a concept. They identify the distinct aspects that together define what the concept truly consists of. Without dimensions, concepts remain unified in name but fragmented in meaning. This step transforms vague ideas into structured analytical frameworks that can guide research decisions. In essence, we need to clarify that clarity comes from structure. Clarity comes from structure. The next question is, why this disaggregation? Why this disaggregation is not just helpful, but necessary. Not just helpful, but necessary. So we need to ask, therefore, why concepts must be disaggregated. We need to explain that most concepts are not singular or simple. They actually contain multiple meanings and multiple facets. Examples such as organizational capacity, security, and governance illustrate how a single term often masks complex internal diversity. Each example demonstrates that different dimensions may vary independently. An organization can have strong human resources but weak financial systems. A society may have strong physical security but weak food security. Treating these as a single, undifferentiated concept leads to analytical confusion and misleading conclusions. This aggregation allows researchers to see where strengths and weaknesses actually lie. By imposing and exposing the internal complexity of concepts, this aggregation sharpens analytical focus. This realization leads directly to the methodological imperative. Concepts must be deliberately broken if they are to guide empirical inquiry. The imperative of disaggregation. We formalize disaggregation as a required step in conceptualization. It shows how an abstract concept becomes usable only when it is systematically divided into dimensions that reflect different attributes, behaviors, or outcomes. Disaggregation forces intellectual precision. It compels us to decide what aspects of a phenomenon will be studied and, just as importantly, what will be excluded. These decisions define the scope of the research and prevent conceptual overreach. Without disaggregation, claims about studying capacity or governance remain too broad to be meaningful. Here, conceptualization becomes an act of disciplined exclusion as much though as inclusion. Having established the necessity of dimensions, the next step is to define what dimensions actually are and how they should be constructed. Defining dimensions. We define dimensions as analytically distinct aspects of a concept, components that together capture its fuller meaning. It also introduces three criteria for effective dimensions. They must capture internal structure, reflect theoretical literature, and enable partial observation. These criteria impose rigorous standards. Dimensions are not arbitrary categories of or intuitive groupings. They must be defensible with scholarly traditions and capable of guiding empirical work. A dimension that cannot, even in principle, be observed or linked to evidence fails its purpose. This is where theory, literature, and conceptual judgment intersect most directly. At this point, the concept has been given internal structure through carefully defined dimensions. But structure alone is not enough. To move from theory to practice, dimensions themselves must be made observable, setting the stage for the phase of the discussion. Example of disaggregating capability. This slide provides a concrete illustration of how an abstract concept can be systematically disaggregated into dimensions. Using the concept of capability, it identifies multiple dimensions such as doctrine, organization, training material, personnel facilities, and leadership. MPLF. L. It ends with L. Drawn, of course, from military and public sector research traditions. The power of this example lies in showing that capability is never a single threat or trait. An organization may have well-trained personnel but outdated equipment, or clear doctrine but weak leadership. Treating capability as a single variable would conceal these differences and distort analysis. Disaggregation, therefore, allows readers to diagnose where capability begins and why, how it varies, and why performance differs across cases. This example demonstrates how disaggregation transforms a vague idea, into an analytical framework. However, identifying dimensions is not a neutral or purely technical act. We need to emphasize that choosing dimensions is and a central and accountable research decision. The essence of conceptualization. We highlight the core decision at the heart of conceptualization. Determine what counts as the concept and what does not. It stresses that identifying dimensions is not a matter of intuition or convenience, but a choice that must be explicitly justified. Every dimension included defines the boundaries of the study, while every excluded dimension limits its claims. These choices shape how findings can be interpreted and defended. Without grounding in theory and literature, dimension selection appears arbitrary, weakening the credibility of the entire research project. Conceptualization, therefore, is inseparable from scholarly justification. Here, conceptualization is framed as an act of intellectual accountability. With dimensions now clearly defined and even justified, the next challenge becomes apparent. Dimensions are still theoretical. To move toward evidence, they must be made observable. And so we move dimensions to indicators. This marks the transition from conceptual structure to empirical observation. It introduces indicators as the mechanism through which dimensions are translated into observable and measurable elements. At this point, research crosses a critical boundary. Dimensions provide meaning, but indicators provide access to reality. Without indicators, dimensions remain ideas rather than objects of investigation. These steps bridges These step bridges theory and data, ensuring that what is being measured genuinely reflect what is being theorized. So in this slide, we signal a turning point. Research moves from abstraction toward evidence. But before defining indicators, it is necessary to understand why dimensions alone are still insufficient. Why dimensions are still not enough. We need to explain that even well-defined dimensions cannot be directly observed or collected as data. Concepts like training, governance, or participation remain theoretical until further specified. This confronts a common misconception. Naming a dimension does not mean it can be measured. Researchers cannot collect training or governance as such. They must identify concrete manifestations that signal their presence or variation. This realization forces the researcher to think carefully, especially about evidence, data source, and measurement strategies. In short, dimensions clarify meaning, but they do not yet produce data. To make empirical research possible, we must define indicators, the concrete traces of theoretical constructs. Defining indicators. So we define indicators as specific, observable, and measurable manifestations of a dimension. Indicators answer a crucial methodological question. How will the researcher know that a dimension exists, varies, or changes? Indicators operationalize theory. They force researchers to specify what counts as evidence and prevent studies from drifting into speculation. Without indicators, claims about concepts remain rhetorical rather than empirical. Well-chosen indicators allow researchers to engage directly with reality and produce defensible findings. With indicators, research finally becomes testable. What do we mean by that? The next slide illustrates this process by showing how a specific dimension can be translated into multiple concrete indicators. Indicator examples, training dimension. This slide provides a practical example of indicator development using the training dimension. Indicators such as hours of instruction, certification completion rates, frequency of exercises, training budgets, and trainer to trainee ratios demonstrate different ways the same dimension can be observed. Each indicator captures a different facet of training: intensity, investment, quality, or reach. Together, they provide a richer and more reliable picture than any single measure could. This example also shows that indicator selection involves analytical judgment. Researchers must decide which indicators best reflect the dimensions in their specific context. So we complete the journey, therefore, here from concept to observable evidence. With indicators in place, research is no longer confined to theory. The next step is to examine how indicators function within the broader conceptual logic that connects concepts, dimensions, and evidence into a coherent whole. Indicators as examples. Participation dimension. We demonstrate in this slide how the abstract dimensions of participation can be translated into concrete indicators such as meeting attendance, voting frequency, proposals submitted, and budget influence. Each indicator reflects a different way of participation that becomes visible in organizational or governance setting. What this example makes clear is that participation is not merely presence. It is action, influence, and contribution. Someone may attend meetings but never vote, or vote without shaping decisions. Using multiple indicators prevents superficial measurement and captures meaningful variations in how participation actually functions. With this example, indicators are shown as tools for analytical depth rather than simple metrics. The next slide generalizes this logic by explaining the core functions indicators serve in research. The three functions of indicators. We identify three essential roles of indicators: making concepts visible, making research testable, and making findings defensible. Together, these functions transform abstract theory into systematic inquiry. Indicators serve as the point of contact between ideas and evidence. They allow us to document phenomena, test claims, and justify conclusions. Without indicators, research remains interpretive and rhetorical. With them, it becomes open to verification, critique, and replication. Indicators are not technical add-ons. They are what make research possible at all. The next slide raises the stakes by showing what happens when indicators are absent. The stakes of indicator development. We contrast we contrast research without indicators and research with indicators. Without indicators, claims about governance, participation, or capacity remain assertions. With indicators, research becomes empirical, systematic, and evidence-based. We need to emphasize that concepts without indicators are rhetorical claims, not research variables. Indicators are what allow studies to move from philosophy to science. This distinction explains why reviewers often reject studies that sound persuasive but cannot demonstrate how claims were empirically established. Here, indicator development is framed as the threshold between speculation and science. With this threshold crossed, the presentation now introduces the logical system that holds concepts, dimensions, and indicators together. The concept dimension indicator logic. The logic is the organizing framework of rigorous conceptualization, CDI. It visually represents the hierarchical relationship between abstract ideas and observable measures. The CDI logic ensures that every indicator is anchored in a dimension and every dimension is anchored in a concept. This hierarchy prevents arbitrary measurement and ensures internal coherence. It also provides a roadmap for both research design and evaluation. With the CDI logic introduced, the next step is to clarify its strict hierarchical nature and why this structure is not optional. The strict logical hierarchy. We formalize the CDI structure as a non-negotiable hierarchy. Indicators validate dimensions, dimensions operationalize concepts, and concepts guide analysis. It emphasizes that this structure is a disciplinary requirement. Each level answers a different question. Concepts name what is being studied. Dimensions define what it consists of. And indicators show how it is observed. Skipping or collapsing levels undermines logic and credibility. The hierarchy ensures that research claims can be traced back to clearly defined ideas. We need to establish the internal logic of strong research. To make this structure even clearer, we present the CDI logic in a simple tabular form. We present the CDI hierarchy using a concrete example showing how organizational capacity breaks into dimensions and indicators. It makes the abstract logic immediately readable. By laying out concepts, dimensions, and indicators side by side, the table reveals how each level depends on the others. It also functions as a diagnostic tool. If a researcher cannot complete such a table, their conceptualization is incomplete. This visual clarity reinforces the discipline required by CDI logic. Then the next step explores what happens when any level of this hierarchy is missing. But before we move, no, we need to pay attention. For example, organizational capacity will focus on training, but under training, we can look at training hours, certification rates, and staff qualification. So that one concept should at least have two dimensions, and for every dimension, there has to be at least two indicators as well. So what's the consequence if this table is incomplete? So failure, we need to outline the failures that occurs when concepts lack dimensions, dimensions lack indicators, or indicators lack conceptual grounding. Each omission leads to a different form of conceptual collapse. Missing dimensions reduce concepts to scholars. So to slogans, sorry. Missing slogans connects theory from essence, from evidence. Disconnect theory from evidence. Missing concepts turn measures into arbitrary numbers. These failures explain to us why some studies generate data that cannot support meaningful conclusions. By identifying these breakdowns, we need to reinforce the necessity of conceptual completeness. We provide a practical test for evaluating whether conceptualization is strong. The test of strong conceptualization. We propose a simple but demanding test. Can the researcher move backward from indicator to dimension to concept without contradiction or ambiguity? This backward logic test exposes weak links in the conceptual chain. If an indicator does not clearly reflect its dimension, or if a dimension does not genuinely represent the concept, the framework must be revised. Strong research withstands this scrutiny at every level. This test turns conceptualization into an evaluative practice, not just a design step. We now examine where researchers should look to discipline and justify their conceptual choices. And where do they look? The correct answer is the literature. We introduce literature as an active force in conceptualization. Rather than merely supporting a study, literature constrains and disciplines conceptual choices. Literature provides definitional precedents, dimensional debates, and tested indicators. It prevents arbitrary decisions and situates research within scholarly traditions. Conceptualization, therefore, cannot occur in isolation from existing knowledge. Having established the centrality of literature, the next step clarifies exactly how literature functions in conceptual work. Literature as conceptual discipline. We need to explain how literature informs concept, definitions, dimension selection, and indicator validity. It emphasizes that the researchers are not free to invent meaning without justification. Engaging the literature ensures that conceptual choices are cumulative rather than idiosyncratic. So, even when researchers challenge existing frameworks, they must do so explicitly and defensively. Literature anchors conceptualization in scholarly accountability. Here, literature is framed as a constraint that strengthens rather than limits research. We break down the specific functions literature performs in conceptualization this way. Literature functions in conceptualization. So, there are four key roles of literature. One, tracing historical evolution. Two, enabling comparative analysis. Three, validating empirical approaches. And four, providing theoretical justification. Together, these functions ensure that conceptual frameworks are informed by past debates and empirical expertise. Literature shows which approaches have worked, which have failed, and why. These allows researchers to make informed, defensible choices. With these functions in mind, we now look at how researchers should actively engage literature. Okay? Engaging the literature literally and critically. We need to emphasize that effective conceptualization requires critical engagement with literature, not mere summary. Researchers must identify consensus, map disagreements, evaluate evidence, and state their own position. Critical engagement transforms the literature review into conceptual framework, and it forces researchers to justify their choices and articulate how their study contributes to or departs from existing frameworks. This is where conceptual originality becomes visible. At this point, the conceptual framework is fully grounded in theory, structure, and evidence. The next section turns to what happens when this work is not done by examining common conceptual failures and how to avoid them. Common conceptual failures at the CDI level. This slide introduces a new phase of the presentation. Diagnosing recurring failures in conceptualization. It signals a shift from ideal frameworks to real-world research practice, acknowledging that many studies fail not because of lack of effort, but because of unresolved conceptual weaknesses. By focusing on the concept dimension indicator level, we emphasize that conceptual failures are structural, not superficial. These failures undermine the logical integrity of research before data collection even begins. Recognizing these patterns is essential both for improving one's own work and for evaluating the work of others. This sets up a critical self-assessment moment. We need to explain also why these failures are so persistent and why they deserve serious attention. The pattern of recurring failures. We need to observe that conceptual failures appear repeatedly across graduate proposals and research designs. Importantly, it clarifies that these problems do not reflect intellectual incapacity, but unfinished conceptualization. Many researchers move forward prematurely, mistaking progress in writing or methodology for conceptual readiness. We need to reframe failure as a developmental issue rather than a personal flaw. Conceptualization requires sustained, iterative thinking, something that is often rushed under time pressure. By normalizing these failures, we encourage critical reflection rather than defensiveness. Let's examine specific failure types, beginning with one of the most common. Concepts without dimensions. We need to describe proposals that announce ambitious concepts such as organizational effectiveness or community resilience without specifying what those concepts actually consists of. The concept appears everywhere, especially in the proposal, but the problem is that it remains undefined. Without dimensions, the concept cannot guide data collection or analysis. The researcher has no criteria for determining what counts as evidence. The study appears focused but is analytically hollow, producing claims that cannot be systematically evaluated or defended. This failure reveals how naming a concept is not the same as conceptualizing it. We need to examine a second failure that occurs when researchers take one step further but stop too soon. That's when there are dimensions but no indicators. We need to describe studies that identify plausible dimensions but fail to specify how those dimensions will be observed or measured. While this represents progress beyond undimensioned concepts, it still leaves research non-operational. Without indicators, dimensions remain theoretical categories with no empirical anchor. Obviously, researchers cannot proceed to data collection because they have not defined what data would actually capture each dimension. This failure often emerges when researchers assume that dimensions are self-evident. Here we see that partial conceptualization is not enough. The next failure illustrates something more subtle but equally damaging: misalignment within the CDI structure. This slide highlights a common shortcut: borrowing indicators from existing studies without checking whether they align with the researcher's own concepts and dimensions. The example shows how satisfaction measures are mistakenly used to represent participation. This mismatch produces invalid research. The study generates data about one phenomenon while claiming to study another. Even when instruments are reliable, they become meaningless if they are conceptually misaligned. Indicator borrowing must always be accompanied by conceptual justification. This failure underscores the importance of alignment across all CDI levels. The next slide addresses a different but pervasive problem, a problem involving language itself. We need to critique the use of evaluative terms such as effective, good, or strong without definition. These terms introduce value judgments into research without specifying standards or criteria. Normative language, masquerading as empirical concepts, creates ambiguity. What counts as effective leadership or good governance depends on perspective, values, and context. Without explicit definition, such terms cannot be measured or defended, thereby undermining research credibility. This failure reveals how language itself can obscure conceptual weakness. That's why we need to ask a deeper question. Why do this failure persist despite repeated guidelines or guidance? Why? Why do they persist? We need to identify structural reasons for recurring conceptual failures, including time pressure, limited engagement with theory, outcome-focused thinking, and weak feedback mechanisms. These pressures encourage researchers to rush toward methods and results, treating conceptualization as a hurdle rather than as foundation. These reframes conceptual rigor as an institutional and pedagogical challenge, not merely an individual one. Understanding why failures persist helps researchers resist them. So, we need to reframe conceptualization not simply as an obstacle, but as one that is needed to a defensible research. In short, conceptualization makes research defensible. This marks a turning point in tone. From critique to affirmation. It asserts that rigorous conceptualization is what allows research to withstand scrutiny, disagreement, and critique. When conceptualization is complete, reviewers may challenge interpretations or methods, but they cannot dismiss the study as incoherent or arbitrary. Conceptual clarity produces transparency, theoretical grounding, empirical specification, and methodological coherence. The 4 questions of conceptual accountability. We introduce now a clear standard for conceptual rigor by presenting 4 questions every researcher must be able to answer. What is the concept? How is it broken into dimensions? How is each dimension observed? And why are these choices justified? These questions transform conceptualization from an abstract exercise into an accountability framework. They require researchers to demonstrate clarity, structure observability, and justification. Together, they define a minimum threshold for credible social science research. Anything less signals unfinished conceptual work. So we establish what conceptual completeness looks like. Now we need to examine the consequences of failing to answer these questions adequately. The consequence of incomplete answers. We make a very blunt claim. Researchers who cannot answer the 4 accountability questions are not ready to proceed to methodology. Instrument design, sampling, and method selection all depend on conceptual clarity. We use a powerful metaphor, building on sand, to emphasize that no amount of methodological sophistication can compensate for conceptual weakness. Data collection without clear meaning produces results that cannot be interpreted or defended regardless of technical precision. Conceptualization is framed as a gatekeeper. Only once it is complete can research move forward responsibly. Now we need to reinforce this by positioning conceptualization as the foundation of all subsequent decisions. Conceptualization as research foundation. We summarize the functions of strong conceptualization in this way. Clarity, focus, coherence, defensibility, and credibility. It presents conceptualization as different as the intellectual infrastructure of research. So each function addresses a common research vulnerability. Clarity prevents confusion. Focus sets boundaries. Coherence ensures logical consistency. Defensibility enables justification. And credibility distinguishes research from opinion. Together, they explain why conceptualization shapes not just design, but scholarly legitimacy. With this foundation articulated, the next slide shows what research looks like when conceptualization is actually done well. So, what defensible research looks like? So, we need to describe also the characteristics of defensible research: transparent logic, theoretical grounding, empirical specification, and methodological coherence. It emphasizes that disagreement is acceptable, but incoherence is not. Defensible research invites critique because its reasoning is visible. Others can trace how concepts leads to dimensions, how dimensions leads to indicators, and how indicators guide methods. This transparency is what allows research to contribute meaningfully to scholarly debate. So having defined defensibility, the presentation now prepares to move forward. We now mark a formal transition from conceptualization to the next phase of research design. From conceptualization to operationalization. So we mark the shift from conceptualization to operationalization. It identifies a critical threshold where theoretical clarity must be translated into empirical practice. Conceptualization answers the question, what do I mean by this concept? Operationalization answers, how exactly will I measure it? We need to emphasize that these are distinct but interdependent phases, meaning must be established before method. These signals movement rather than closure. With concepts, dimensions, and indicators in place, the research is ready to cross into methodological decision making. This is the critical threshold. And therefore the reason why it needs to be reiterated before we move forward. Or even before I am moving forward. So, so we need to clarify the nature of the threshold between conceptualization and operationalization. It visually and conceptually distinguishes understanding from measurement. Crossing this threshold means that conceptual decisions begin to dictate methodological requirements. Indicators are no longer just theoretical markers. They now demand specific forms of data, instruments, and analytical techniques. At this point, conceptual clarity begins to constrain and guide methodological choice. And we need to explain how this transformation unfolds in practice. The transformation process. We need to outline the sequence through which indicators become variables. Variables determine data sources, and data sources constrain methods. It shows how methodology flows logically from conceptualization. Rather than choosing methods first, this process ensures that methods are selected because they fit the conceptual structure. This reverses a common mistake in research design, where methods drive questions rather than the other way around. We need to make clear that operationalization is not arbitrary. It is conceptually driven. We need to examine the specific questions operationalization must answer. So, what operationalization addresses? And remember, the second, third, and fourth lectures today will be about this. We need to detail the practical questions operationalization must resolve, including data correspondence, instrumentation, measurement level, and analytical methods. Each question traces directly back to conceptual choices. Indicators determine what data are relevant, which instruments are appropriate, and what kinds of analyses are valid. Operationalization thus becomes an extension of conceptual logic, not a separate technical exercise. Here, the conceptual framework fully shapes empirical practice. So, we need to clarify the dependency relationships between conceptualization and operationalization. Let's look at the dependency between the two. So there's a fundamental asymmetry in this case. No operationalization can fix weak conceptualization, but strong conceptualization makes operationalization almost inevitable. Even advanced measurement, techniques and even sophisticated statistical methods cannot rescue poorly conceptualized research. Conversely, when concepts, dimensions, and indicators are clear and justified, methodological choices become straightforward and defensible. This slide closes the conceptualization phase with a very clear lesson. Meaning must come before measurement. With this dependency established, the groundwork is complete for the final section of the presentation. Why strong conceptualization enables operationalization? We need to reinforce a central insight here. When conceptualization is rigorous and complete, operationalization becomes substantially more straightforward. The hardest intellectual work, defining meaning, structure, and evidence, has already been done. Clear indicators point naturally to data sources. Well-defined dimensions suggest appropriate measurement strategies, and theories grounded concepts guide instrument design. Rather than struggling to fit methods to vague ideas, researchers find that methodological choices emerge logically from conceptual clarity. So we need to reframe operationalization as a consequence of good thinking, not a separate technical hurdle. With this logic established, the presentation now previews what lies ahead in the operationalization phase. The next phase preview. So we need to outline the major components of the upcoming operationalization phase, including variable types, measurement levels, instrument designs, validity and reliability, sampling strategies, and data collection. Each of these topics build directly on the conceptual framework already established. Variables emerged from indicators. Measurement levels follow from how indicators are defined, and sampling strategies are shaped by what kinds of variations the study seeks to capture. This preview reinforces continuity rather than rupture between phases. Rather than closing the conversation, we open the door to application. We pause forward motion to consolidate the most important lessons from conceptualization. Key essential principles of conceptualization. This is a synthesis moment now, drawing together the core lessons of the presentation It invites us to step back and reflect on what has been established about conceptual rigor. Key takeaways serve as intellectual anchors. They remind us that conceptualization is not a single step, but a disciplined process that shapes everything that follows. This moment of consolidation ensures that insights are retained, not just understood. With the key lessons framed, the presentation now articulates its first foundational principle. Core Principle 1. Conceptualization precedes everything. We need to assert that conceptualization must be completed before sampling, instrumentation, or analysis can proceed meaningfully. Rushing to methods guarantees confusion, regardless of technical sophistication. We need to challenge productivity-driven research cultures that reward speed over clarity. Investing time in conceptualization pays dividends throughout the research process by preventing misalignment, revision, and defensibility problems later on. Having established this, we need to emphasize structure, specifically the non-negotiable logic that governs conceptual rigor. We need to reiterate that the concept dimension indicator hierarchy is a disciplinary standard, not a methodological preference. All three levels must be present, coherent, and justified. Completeness ensures nothing essential is missing. Coherence ensures logical consistency, and justification grounds choices in theory and evidence. Together, these criteria defines what counts as credible conceptualization. With structure firmly in place, we need to highlight the role of scholarly tradition in disciplining conceptual choices. Literature disciplines concepts. We need to emphasize that conceptualization cannot be separated from engagement with literature. Scholarly work provides definitions, dimensional frameworks, and validated indicators. Rather than serving as background, the literature review becomes the justification for conceptual decisions. It shows how a study fits within, extends, or challenges existing knowledge, making research cumulative rather than isolated. With literature positioned as a disciplinary force, the core principle brings the argument to its fullest expression. Strong conceptualization. We need to synthesize the entire presentation into a single claim. The quality of conceptualization sets an upper bound on the quality of the research. No amount of advanced technique can rescue research built on conceptual confusion. In the same way, Strong conceptualization clarifies methods, strengthens analysis, and enhances credibility. This principle reframes rigor as intellectual discipline rather than technical prowess. With all core principles articulated, we now conclude by turning from theory to practice, inviting you to assess your own readiness. This is your conceptual checklist. Moving forward, we ask whether you can define the concept, identify dimensions, specify indicators, justify choices, and trace logic back without contradiction. The checklist transforms conceptualization into an ongoing self-audit. It empowers us to pause, revisit, and refine our frameworks before moving forward. This reflective discipline protects future research from foundational weakness. And so we close with a simple and yet demanding message. If the answer to every question is yes, the researcher is ready for operationalization. If not, return to conceptualization is not a setback, but an investment. Strong research begins with clarity, and clarity is earned through disciplined thought. As we close, it is worth remembering that research is not defined by the tools we use, the software we master, the data we collect. Research is defined by the clarity of our thinking. Long before a variable is measured or an interview is conducted, research succeeds or fails in the quiet discipline of conceptualization. Conceptualization is where we earn the right to claim knowledge. It is where we decide what we mean, what we will count as evidence, or what we are willing to defend. It is not the most visible part of research, nor the most celebrated, but it is the part that determines whether our work will endure scrutiny, contribute to understanding, and matter beyond the moment of publication. Conceptualization is an act of intellectual courage. It requires slowing down in a culture that rewards speed, choosing precision over ambition, and accepting that clarity is hard won. But when this work is done well, everything else, everything else becomes possible. Methods align, data speak, findings carry weight. So as you move forward toward operationalization, data collection, and even analysis, carry this discipline with you. Return to your concepts. Test your dimensions. Interrogate the indicators. Ask not only what am I measuring, but what do I truly mean? What do I truly mean? Because in the end, good research is not having quick answers. It is about asking questions well and having the conceptual integrity to stand behind the answers you will soon produce. Let's go for a short break and let's go back to research design and methodology next. Thank you.